Dr. Jeffries kept saying, Latrella, we got to recognize this symbol. I said, no, we can't. She's not an ancestor. But she is now. So his spirit felt something and knew something that my spirit didn't know at that time, that she was going to be an ancestor. We're going to recognize her today as well. Not planned, but it is what it is. She's here. We're going to honor her, Dr. Clark's wife, who helped him when he needed the help. Honored his spirit when he needed it honored. So that's what we're going to say. We're going to ask that we do the Black National Anthem now. And it's in your...
Jeffries, Nana Bidio. Most of you know that we've been very close to our brothers and sisters in Ghana. And Dr. Ben linked us to Egypt. Dr. Clark linked us to Ghana. And so when the First World Alliance was born with Mother Kefa and Brother Bill, they made sure that we kept that connection. Dr. Clark made sure we got to Ghana and paid our respects because he was told that he was one of the Ga people of Ghana. And so his partner at the end of his life was Sister Sybil Williams Clark. And they went to Ghana with all of the glory and all of the prestige that they could muster. And one of the great queen mothers of the period in terms of our consciousness, of course, was Mother Kefa. And so she was able to span both sides of the continent. She connected with Dr. Clark, so that linked her to West Africa. She connected to Dr. Ben, and that linked her to Kemet. And so we were blessed to have this sister up from the south. And I know most of you have southern origins. If you weren't lucky enough to come up from the African-American South, then you go further south and then you're in those islands. And I know that the rest of you all come up from some of those islands. We might even have some of you who went further south into South America, the Guyanas. I know we ain't got no Brazilians here because I'm looking at you and I don't see no Brazilians. But if you go further south, then you got the largest concentration of Africans in the New World, and that's in Brazil. So these traditions we have are real, and that's why I was glad that Nana Nketia could be here. He's the younger. There's Nana Nketia, the elder, that was a close associate of Dr. Clark, and Sister Sybil, and the rest of us. And so he's come to America for a special mission of Pan-African linkage. And so when we found this activity on the calendar, we said that before you go back to Washington and on to Florida, you have to come by Harlem. And so thanks to those of you in ASCAC, Sister Latrella, and all of our leaders, we have this activity that we have today. Mother Kefa was very special to me, simply because I got deep roots in Georgia. I don't see many Georgians here. But there's some South Carolinians, there's some Virginians, some North Carolinians. But we have to appreciate someone coming up from South Carolina or from Georgia like Mother Kefa and finding their way to the Big Apple and negotiating it successfully. And Brother Reggie was telling you how she moved into the consciousness with Dr. Ben and she just provided a queen mother for Dr. Ben. And however, she had to negotiate New York first, so she had to become part of the people who could survive New York. And with Brother Bill, they were able to find their way in the union movement, taking care of business. And then in the late 70s, that's when Dr. Ben put his magic onto their experience. And so they opened up a consciousness for the world. First World Alliance was first, not just in New York, it was was first in these United States. It was first in the Caribbean. It bounced back to Africa. It was first in England. All of these places replicated the First World Alliance formula of passing the information not on to the elites, the people getting their PhDs, their BBDs and whatever, but passing the knowledge on to the masses of our people. So we had to give thanks that the sister was seriously attached to our local folks. Our brother Bill was attached to our local folks, and she was able to tolerate not only working in the union industry, but it's hard working out here with you all. It's very frustrating. And luckily, we have what I call our sacred mission, and that means we're going to bring that truth no matter what. No matter what you do to us, no matter what we're suffering, we're going to bring that sacred mission. And so some of you have been able to record it. I'm looking at Brother Gil Chris, and so we have a record of it. Some have been able to institutionalize it. I'm looking at my brother FDC. He's been able to make it a part of our history in real ways. Some, like Brother Reggie, were force-fed it. It wasn't easy to give Africanness to Reggie. There was a resistance. He let me know that he really was from the projects in the Bronx. I said, brother, that's a way station. You got to get into your Africanness. And he had other thoughts, but he became one of our greatest source of passing the knowledge on to the young men. He became the leader of the Sons of Africa. You talk about 50, 60 brothers who were trying to be followers of Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Mother Kefa, and Sister Sybil, and others. So our brother, Dr. Nketia, is not only a traditional leader, he's also an enormous Pan-Africanist. At one point, he was the chair of the executive committee of our hotel. He was at the University of Cape Coast, but his people called him to come to the traditional home where he had roots. And so he went to the Sekunde Takavati area to undertake a traditional rulership. So he brought to it a Pan-African consciousness. He brought to it a desire for education. He brought to it a linkage to us. And so, and the traditional structure gave him a status, an understanding of his people, and his uncle was just a wonderful figure. We were in the bathroom. What was it? We were in the big space next door here called the Schomburg Center, and they had a program called Black Campus and Revolution. And they had some people on the stage, including an outstanding scholar, Dr. Bracey from the University of Massachusetts, a young scholar from one of our institutions, and a sister. And so when I went to the bathroom to relieve myself, not to take no dope or none of those things that you always prone to do, but just to relieve myself, Brother Bracey went in there, too. And so here's two older scholars. Bracey got white hair, a white beard and whatnot. After we did what we were supposed to do, then he says, I have something for you. And so when we went out the bathroom, he went to his table and pulled out a photo of one of our greats, Dr. Chancellor Williams, and Nana Nketiah's uncle, Nana Nketia IV. And Chancellor Williams was in the chair, and Nana was standing over him. And then what Bracey said was that not only did they know each other, but Bracey knew Nana Nketia when he was in the Massachusetts area, and he was teaching in the college there. So I'm saying we're connected. And Mother Kefa knew it best. She appreciated her Georgia roots. She appreciated Dr. Clark and West Africa. and she had the courage to follow Dr. Ben to the Nile. And it wasn't easy, because Dr. Ben, I don't care what the craft says about him, he had his human frailties, and he manifested them. And luckily you had a mother, Kefa, who never got mad, never let anything keep her down. She could hold up the Dr. Benton, the Dr. Clark, and the Dr. Lenz. You know, and I went into a house, and luckily, I grew up in a household in New Jersey that had dogs and cats. So I could handle it. It wasn't easy, Sister Latrella, because the cat had a personality. I mean, those cats were treated so properly that they moved around, and you better treat them properly too. I mean, that's right. So I'm saying our people have all of these qualities, and we need to appreciate it. All these human qualities, and all of these frailties, weaknesses, but they learn to Africanize their lives, to make up and to cover up the weaknesses. Sister Latrella wasn't a chief priestess back in the day, but she said, I'm going to be one. Let's give her an acknowledgement. A round of applause. She is so good. And Kadisi didn't have all of this that he got going for himself and then passed it on, but he decided that's his sacred mission. And he has become a Kemetic African priest. Let's give him an acknowledgement. And then the rest of us, let's give ourselves an acknowledgement. And hold it. Let me see that again. Charles, let me see that again. You all did it so fast, I didn't. Handshake, let me see that handshake. The brotherhood coming together. Hey! So you got two brothers who have a strong personality and consciousness, and Sister Kefa brought them together here today. And then because we are who we are, they are treating each other like fellow kindred spirits in the struggle. Appreciate it, Reggie. Appreciate it, Charles. Now, the brotherhood, sisterhood that we've been a part of is complemented by this brother here. He's going home soon, but I want him to give us some words of wisdom, whatever he feels is appropriate. And see, this is our last day together. So he'll have some relief from the pressure that Jeffries puts on you. And when he gets home, he'll say, I was with Dr. J, but do you know all the shit that he's doing? Getting out of here and there and everywhere. Nana and Ketia, welcome to New York and to Harlem.
The greeting that I had was Hotep. I'm ready. As they say, when you have an elder like Dr. Jeffries speaking, really I shouldn't be speaking, because they said that when the elder takes his bath, the water is finished. So he asking me to address you, and I'm very shy too. Probably the only shy chief in Ghana. So I'm at a loss for words. But I've seen the young ones who are sitting over there, and that encourages me. You know, how do I start this stuff? I came for the African Heritage Study Association meeting in DC. Then I was ordered by Dr. Jeffries to be in New York. When the general commands you, you obey. So here I am, and he's teaching me Harlem. You know, we've been here in the night. I've seen the lights of Harlem, and I've come during the day and seen the sunshine of Harlem. But most interestingly for me was that I think I'm a relatively very lucky human being, and there's a reason for it. But I was very young. I had a lot of African Americans around me. I didn't know that they were different from us. All that I knew was that they called them Negroes, and we were Africans. It's so funny. Now that I can think back, it's so funny. Then, of course, we went through a period, and then one day I had Malcolm's autobiography land on my lap. That changed my world.
That's right.
I could not believe that someone had gone through that experience. It made me start seeing the world from another perspective. But I was still reading, educating myself. Whether educating or miseducating, that's another matter, but it was more of a miseducation. Then my predecessor, who was very close to Malcolm, Maya Angelou, just name them, very, very close to them, and happened to have taught at Amherst, passed on. I wasn't in Ghana, but later on I was just going through his library. I didn't see what book I wanted. And I saw a book, finally. I think the book came out to me, written by John Henry Clark. I didn't know what he was, or what he is at the time. I said, well, lots of an African World Revolution. Let me just pick it up, put it somewhere. Then one day I started reading. Then I realized that my head had been screwed. It's been turned upside down. But it made me start questioning things, everything that we've been in. And if there's anybody, even though I lived in Africa, followed the path of my culture, and so on and so forth, I wasn't an African. It was Clark who started turning my mind. So, and I came across one of the special people that I came across was Dr. J. You know, Pan-Africanism, it's not an intellectual, it's a religion. It's as simple as ABC. And then in front of the Cape Coast, I used to chair the Museums and Monuments Board in Ghana, and then all kinds of silly, silly things. But one day when we did the march, for those of you who've been in Cape Coast before, and we got to the door, and we were going to knock on it, we needed somebody to stand up and speak. I was with a young man called Robert. He's still there. I looked for him when his hair was black. It's now all gray. I said, he says, Dr. J, Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Jeffries. So he stood on the car. And there he mesmerized the whole crowd and said, this is our sacred mission. The sacred mission is not about Africa. It's about liberating the human being from the oppressors. It's about being African. In itself is liberation. But it sets you a duty, and the duty of liberating others. Oppressors have so much things in control. In Africa, part of the problem is that you don't laugh with borrowed teeth. On the whole continent, we are trying to smile with Eurocentrism all over the place. And sometimes I question people. When you say president, I'll just ask you some young boys. How do you say the word president or your excellency in your language? And they don't know. I said, in my culture, for example, when you use red, it has a special significance. So why do you put a red carpet for me when I'm coming? Who designed all these things? So we live in the world designed by someone, and we try to fix ourselves in it. The only way to do it is to deconstruct. I was with, I listened to the first speaker.
Repeat that again. I think these folks are asleep.
No, they're not asleep. I was listening to the first speaker of the South African after Mandela, when Mandela came on, the first speaker of parliament, an Indian African, or an African Indian. And he was talking about the world, says, some people have even defined the globe in such a way that they have a Far East and a Middle East. Middle East of what? And Far East from where? But these are things you don't think about. So the world is defined according to somebody else's worldview, and we are all following it. In course of that, I learned a few things from people like Wade Nobles, you know, Dr. J himself, Professor Small, Naeem Akbar, whom I've not met, Issa Hilliard, and others. And it confirmed what one Ghanaian writer wrote. And please, when I use the word Ghanaian, please forgive me. There are two ways to it. Well, I'm proud that that territory decided to name itself, because we have the right to name ourselves, Ghana. At least we are not holding to the name given to us by one of the oppressors. But at the same time too, I know that using the name or the word Ghana is an affirmation of the 1884-1885 Berlin divisions. So there are two ways, the pride and the shame. But the most important thing from Ayikwe is that he says Africa can only be understood through Egypt.
Say that again?
Africa can only be understood through Egypt, through Kemet.
Years together. So if you see a Dr. J doing his thing, you need to know he's had a partner in this struggle, in this awakening, in this renaissance. Born and raised a few feet away from here in Harlem Hospital. Married down the street a few blocks. Educated further down the street at Hunter College. Put some icing on the cake at Yale University. And she's a pioneer. She's the first person of our group that went to Africa in 1960. I followed her in 1961, and then we met, hooked up in 64, and the rest is history. It ain't been easy. It ain't been a cakewalk, because she's too spiritual to allow craziness to be around her. So she's had to chase the crazy spirits away from me. But I want to give thanks to our female members of our family. I want to give thanks to Latrella, who was able to drag me out of the comfort of Teaneck and take me down into the woods in central Jersey and to the grave, the unmarked grave of Mother Keffa. And we did our spiritual thing there. So we got to get our resources together to bring her up out of there and put her in one of our large cemeteries here. So that's the responsibility. Latrella's going to work on y'all. We've got to come up with some money. So stop buying these Gucci bags and these sneakers and whatnot. Save it so we can do something for Mother Keffa. Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, her African name is Nana Abibio.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here amongst family, mothers, fathers, relatives, blood relatives. All of you are blood relatives. You know, they say blood brotherhood, blood sisterhood. When you think alike, they say that even impacts your genome. Epigenetics is the thought, too, that you can retransform things that are not and call those things that are not as though they were. And indeed, those are the things that we learned from the Aquaba doll, that the woman that was getting older in age and wanted to have a child, she carried around the Aquaba doll, the wooden image, in her garment. And as she looked in the circular form of the head that was like the continuing lunar cycles that was circulating, went back into nature, which is the epigenetic aspect of things, then those things in time cycles that were put into words became part of a living reality. And so therefore we are so grateful for Nana Nkachia to be here. I have been working with the symbols and signs for a long time. We remember, all of you remember, when Leonard brought at City College Dr. Nunu, Richard Nunu, who was over the museums and monuments. And he came here trying to do research to trace back up at Parting Ways. That was the name of the project, up at Plymouth, Massachusetts. And he was able to find that those early people that came to America at Plymouth Rock, that amongst them was an Akan, a person from Ghana in antiquity. And he said found the name Kumani there. He said, no, that Kumani and Kufi, those are names from Ghana. And not only that, we remember too that down at the African burial ground, we have the whole burial ground chart, and we had the Adinkra symbols there. Thus, the more you need to buy the book of Nana Nkechia so that you can pick up things. And you may say, well, I know this, that, and the other, because I know NCA had a whole chest full of Adinkra symbols in a t-shirt. And we were wearing that for a while, too, and still wearing it. Other organizations, I still have little t-shirts and things. I got stuff in my bag, too, where there's things but that was part of my research that I did for my PhD, was to go and to look at those symbols, because it was Arthur Caraway, a well-known artist in the East Coast who had exhibited in museums, but he spent time in South Africa. He was in the Congo during the time of Lumumba, but he did his main work with the Museum of Monuments in Ghana, and also went up country to live in some of the thatch huts and the mud dwellings, etc. And he was doing research on the Adinkra symbols. And so too, in my dissertation that I wrote for Yale University, I was talking about his findings, because the two people that I worked with was two. One, Houston Conwell, whose work is on the ceiling floor upstairs in the Schomburg Library, and also the grounding, the floor plan for the burial ground, so that those symbols were around with African Americans back in those 17th century graves, and so that we are doing things and copying things, but the greater, we didn't have the dimension. And the dimension you can find in Nana Nkechia's book. You have some young scholars coming along too, and so they are codifying some of the Adinkra symbols today into groupings, so that there's a group that deal with patience, another with love or mother, hope, another group with faithfulness, with great ancestors, with the unity and with the betrayal. Why betrayal? Because we know that amongst us, there's always someone sometimes who defeat the plans, like Nat Turner and many others. Like when you see the movie Harriet, there was someone, black, that was messing up the plans. And there's a video out, how did the great empires of Mali fall? How did the great empire of Congo fall? And we find out it was the same thing. There was someone within the system was undermining. But we don't have to look far, because sometimes we undermine our own plans, because there's a great God that we love and love us so deeply, until that God transforms our lives. But if we don't continue to walk in the Spirit, we find that there's another spirit can get in too easily and become the antagonist. And so too we know that negative and positive always work together in life. That's why you have the Anansi doing tricks and all kinds of things, and we follow the trickster culture amongst the Eshu. So we come from a deep reservoir of understanding wisdom. So when we look at biblical data and we see the wise and the foolish in the parables, a book of parables and Ecclesiastic, we know that those things got into the Bible because there were cultures even coming from Kemet that was talking the values that we need today. We find that bigger and bigger and bigger is not necessarily better and better. Go to the food store in Fatishi, you see these big old grapefruits, hey, that's GMO, genetically modified. You see some big old carrots and this, that, and the other. Is bigger is not always better. Sometimes we see all of this stuff that got canola oil in it, and we know canola oil, you just Google it, is no good. CAN for Canada, Ola is for oil. They invented an industrial piece of mess to put in your food because it's so cheap. You look at the label, read the label of everything, and you'll see that that's the case. And so therefore our God said, Jesus said, be healed, but not so much. More so, he said, be thou made whole. Be thou made whole is a greater sense of healing because it means that you have to turn back and fetch it and get who you are, know who you are. And the healing is full with the fullness of the ancestry, the fullness of the bloodline and of the DNA. And so I also say that to say bigger is not always better because we need to understand human relationships. Get the book from Dr. Nkechia. He's constantly telling you about the socialization process, about the culture, the economics, and all of the things that we need to know to keep us together so that we will have less numbers amongst us who are the betrayers or the undermining people or the people who never turn back to fetch what the ancestors had to say and to glean the truth from the powers. Oh Lord, we love you so much because you loved us even when we were not lovable to ourselves. We thank you for the illumination that you have and the power and the sensitivity, Lord, that you treat us like your own, your bloodline, your true bloodline. The epigenetics of us is intertwined with you, who you are. And so that we look downtown in the skyline of New York as we are here in New York, and we see around 57th Street, there's a brand new building that's so high, 130 stories high. Can you imagine? 130, and they're condominiums. People pay $60 million limit to get a condominium in that building. But we do have the vessel, the sculpture that's climbing up to no place. So that we're concerned about the next generation following after the bigger, the exciting, the exuberant, the greatness. But my last word is to say, we don't want to leave behind the generations that are intertwined and connected with our blood. Leonard Jeffries, we thank you for the Black Studies Department and the 22 professors you had there. We thank you for bringing in Richard Nunu, who was able to help us with the research that we needed. And now we see that the Black Studies is not there like it used to be. We see that it has not died. Because Black Studies, Leonard Jeffries, Walking and Talking, has brought to us Nana Nkechia. Thank you.
All right, you can do better than that. The sister flew in here, couldn't get her friend together, and then brought you some understanding. So we want you to know that we're serious about this process of Africanizing, and you should be. But of course, you're trying to do too much. We were supposed to go this evening to a gala. And so Rosalind was going to get a rest, come here, participate, and then we go to the gala. However, everybody wants us to do this and do that. I was told at the Ron Daniels activity this afternoon by a brother who was there. He said, well, where were you last night? I said, well, we were in Queens or Brooklyn. He said, you were supposed to be at the gala. So the gala was last night. And that's the way it's supposed to be. It was in my hometown, North New Jersey. So that gives me some time in the afternoon. I'll be at Clark House between 1 and 3 o'clock with books from Nana Nkechia. He would have gotten on the train heading down to Washington and then on to Florida. But his books, Dr. Clark's books, Wade Noble's books, and others will be available if any of you wish to help us put the funds together to continue this great work. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Madase, peace.
Dr. J, before they leave, can they buy it now instead of I think we only have 2 books left, Reggie.
One is mine.
Oh, well, yes, we will have books back there if we can.
Okay, you
We'll
cannot
have
sell
books back there.
anything inside
Yeah, we'll
here.
have books back there, but you can't transfer them.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jeffries,
Hey, nothing to it, sister.
Dr. Rosalind Jeffries.